Steve Baker is an investigative journalist for Blaze Media, and he was on the show earlier this week, but only by phone. And that was for a reason. So today, he finally joins us by a video call. So Steve, tell everyone what you've been doing in Chicago this week, because we've been waiting all week to hear these stories.
Jill, it's finally exciting to be able to talk about it without trying to hide my identity and hide behind our cover. We were embedded with one of our friendly organizations, Friendly to the Blaze, and we were basically on a fact-finding operation. We were in one of the hotels that was greatly populated by delegates. I mean, literally, when I say hundreds or maybe even thousands. This is a hotel with 1,600 rooms, and obviously it was mostly booked by the DNC delegates, congressional members, senators, governors, all types of politicians within the Democratic Party machine. And what we were doing was essentially looking for a way to, basically enter into conversation without being confrontational, and to find a way to get as much information from the inside as we could about what their thoughts were, what their hopes are, what their anticipations are for this coming election season. And I think we were very successful in so doing. And it was good. A lot of people were worried that I would be recognized in this, but the reality is I don't think that the average DNC delegate maybe watches or listens to Blaze. I did have a couple of people that recognized me. They said, I know you from somewhere. Where is that? But then part of my story is that, of course, in real life, I am a musician. I said, you've probably seen me on stage somewhere before. So that was my primary cover.
Nice, Steve. Well, great to hear it. I hope we got our money's worth this week in Chicago. Sending you out there was a curveball and a very interesting project. Of course, Julio was there all week with the protests, which really didn't go as crazy, I think, as everyone thought, but they were real. Can you say a little bit more about the product at the end of this, like what we'll be seeing?
We're not going to be able to reveal one of these James O'Keefe or Project Veritas type moments because it just doesn't happen really with just basic political conversation. And here's why. It's because the speakers at the DNC are already saying all of the most radical things with their outside voices already. So when you're getting delegates and even politicians, people running for office right now, we talk to people that are lady that's running against Matt Gaetz in Florida. We talk to the chairman of the Senate Democratic floor, I forget what floor manager for Kentucky, politicians out of Tennessee, Pennsylvania. Those were the main delegations in the hotel where we were staying. And so we had a lot of conversations with quite a few important people within the Democratic Party, but we're not going to get those surprise, shocking statements because what's shocking anymore coming from them? They're as extreme as they can possibly be. The reality is that, and there's no other way to say it, if I had to give you an overall impression of all of the conversations we had this week, this is a party of people that are motivated by their feelings. They're motivated by an image and not by the numbers, the facts, the math. That's not how they're processing their own politics. It is a feelings-based party. It is the way they look. It is the way they feel. It is who they choose to sleep with, how they dress, what gender they decide to be, and it's all based on feelings. With, of course, obviously the overriding sacrament of abortion seems to be the largest driving factor for the Democratic machine. Of course, that seems to be that way every cycle, but it's particularly evident this time.
So, Steve, with all of those feelings in the air, we know that everybody was there for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Now, what were the feelings like of the people that you were actually interacting with? Were they really excited for Kamala Harris?
I'm going to tell you, last night I watched Kamala Harris, her speech, her entire speech, every word in our hotel lobby. It's a gigantic, old, 150-year-old hotel with a wonderful gathering place, and can accommodate several hundred people. And most of the delegates, of course, were at the arena, not there. But there was probably 100 people in the big lobby bar area. And we watched the speech there. People were cheering in the bar area. Wait staff would stop and just gush over her. They were cheering at the end of the speech. They cheered very much so. And then as the delegates were arriving, I mean, they were effusive. This was a feel-good moment for them, and there's no way of getting around that. And of course, the people that we talked to last night told us, many of them have been to several conventions, the DNC meetings, and they said it was the best speech they had ever seen. It's far surpassed anything that they've ever witnessed before. I saw, even in my own news feed on my social media account, some of my more liberal musician friends who were also gushing over this, saying that if ever there was a convention, a DNC that they would have gone to, they would have liked to have been there, because this is their moment in history, because they are excited about a woman of color finally becoming president of this country. Doesn't matter what the issues is, it seems it's more about the looks, the feelings, the packaging than it is the actual issues themselves.
Well, former FBI Director James Comey is drinking the Kamala Kool-Aid. He endorsed her for president on X, writing that Kamala Harris made me feel like it's finally morning in America. Everyone who cares about the rule of law, ironic, that's my interpretation, and America's indisposable role in the world should vote for Harris and Waltz. I will. So, Steve, I'll ask you, do you think that this will help Harris win that deep state vote, or was she even really in trouble of it at all?
Well, Comey just exemplified what I was talking about moments ago, is that even for him, we're talking about, a former FBI director. He's talking about feelings over substance. He's talking about that vision that they have of some DEI wonderland that's going to sweep across this country, that we're all going to be swept up in this moment of diversity, equity, inclusion, and that somehow it's going to make all of our lives better. It's going to make inflation go away. It's going to make housing affordable. All of these things, which we of course know is absolutely untrue. But I have to tell you, when you have these conversations with these delegates, and by the way, when we were having these conversations, they were very friendly. They were never controversial. Even when I would ask hard questions and I would pose, because I was a Democrat, I was wearing a Kamala Harris lapel pin. And as I was having these conversations, the one thing that I was able to do was I was able to make an actual connection, a friendly connection, so much so that last night when people were coming back from the arena, they were literally looking for myself and the girl, Amy, the actress that I was with, and inviting us over, giving us hugs and taking photos with us. And then this morning, checking out of the hotel, we ran into people in the checkout. We ran into people in the lobby. We ran into people at the coffee shop there that wanted to take a photo with us, wanted to. I never exchanged any of my social media. That would be that would be a little dangerous. That would be shocking to them if I did that. But we developed what some would say would be friendships. It proves to me that you can still have a relationship with people on the other side like we used to. They're not all our enemies, but then again, we also weren't posing as who I really am. I was posing myself as an actor in the moment, sympathetic to their cause, sympathetic to their political views. And so I would imagine that if I had gotten confrontational, if I had put on a Trump pin, it would have been a completely different situation.
Well, don't go anywhere, Steve, because we have some more shady details about the Trump assassination attempt just next. It's been over a month after the Trump assassination attempt, and so much remains unanswered, which only fuels the talk of conspiracy. So, Steve, let's bring you back in. So how much merit is there to the possibility that this could be a deep state cover-up?
Well, I'm convinced that it's a deep state cover-up. We just have to decide, and we have to find out and learn whether they're covering up their deep state incompetencies or they're covering up something much more sinister. Now, as we have reported in the past, myself and Joe Hanneman, as we've been working on this story, our sources say that it's almost impossible to believe that this young man, Thomas Crooks, had not been groomed for quite some time. They feel like that they see their own handiwork. And I'm talking about guys that come from our intelligence community, guys that did this overseas, guys that did this in, very dangerous and hot spots around the world, where they would groom disaffected, lonely young men into being physical and human weapons when they needed to be activated. And as they said to me, this feels like my handiwork. That's an actual quote that we had from one of our sources.
Steve, what do you make of the news coming out yesterday that Secret Service agents were actually placed on leave after the assassination attempt? Have you been able to follow this in the midst of all your secret comings and goings?
Well, I will tell you that fortunately, Joe has been bulldogging this while I've had other responsibilities this week. But he and I were able to get together this morning now that those additional responsibilities on me have been lifted, and we've been able to get caught up. And one of the things that he has done is he's been able to speak directly to the Secret Service through their public relations office, and he's getting quotes and comments back from them, but they're not corroborating anything that we're hearing from these other sources. So when we hear, whether it's New York Post or the New York Times, say that these suspensions have happened, the Secret Service themselves will not corroborate. When Joe has reached back out to them and expressed, well, this is what's being said by these other agencies, they replied again and said, we're not responsible for what other agencies say. So once again, Blaze Media, we're going to take the, I'm not going to call it the middle road, but we're going to wait for absolute confirmation on all of this. And that includes the entire effort that we've made in investigating this story, not just this. As you know, some news agencies, large and small, they jump the gun to be first and to get the scoop. And that's okay if they have the real information. But we are actually in communication with the Secret Service, and they're not giving us that information themselves.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit, because UK citizens are getting arrested for their social media posts, and that has been one of the biggest stories that has been going on over the last month. There was a recent article on the blaze.com that argues that the United States actually isn't that far from this kind of censorship, and big tech that was in control was actually accelerated by January 6th. So from your personal experience, what can you tell us about the weaponization of the social justice system and the way that the citizens were present on January 6th have been getting this used against them, Steve?
Yeah, well, obviously, the technologies that we're aware of are easily used and weaponized against us. First of all, if it's just your own cell phone, it has been easily tracked. As you know, I've sat in the courthouse at these trials. I've seen the demonstrations, the actual multimedia presentations in the courtroom by the Department of Justice in their efforts to convict these January 6th defendants, and showing very, proudly how they could track somebody from their home in Dallas, where they spent the night in Arkansas, where they spent the next night in Virginia. And then as they moved into DC on January 6th, they literally could track their steps through the building itself, the Capitol building, if they went into the building, all of these types of things. So you're all of us are carrying that type of monitoring device in our pockets every day. But of course, obviously, as we become much more of a surveillance state, and we haven't caught up to the UK yet, anything like that, but at the Capitol, it's pretty close, because we know, as we've reported, there's some 1,800 cameras in the Capitol complex. So it's pretty hard to get away from one unless you know where the blind spots are. Particularly all of the areas where the protests were, those cameras have been used effectively against them and identifying them. When they haven't been used, the FBI has been able to pull cell phone camera video off of other people's cameras that you were in the presence of. Of course, obviously, there were a lot of news organizations. The FBI had been able to secure a lot of the news organizations' videos as well. And then we also are aware that there were some other technologies being used that day. We're fearful that there were even greater so well publicized technologies that were used that day. We know that real-time facial recognition was deployed. We know that there were some jamming technologies deployed. These are easily carried in backpacks, not even large backpacks that can carry these types of devices. That can scramble. If you wanted to scramble, say for instance, the communications of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, you could do that very effectively by just having an operative in their vicinity, preventing them from communicating. And not all of that is a nefarious action by law enforcement when they have maybe a fear of a particular group that has been violent in the past. But in this particular case, we all know that the Proud Boys like to bust heads in other protests, but the Oath Keepers had never done that. But we also know that the Oath Keepers were being very closely monitored and surveilled on the ground that day.
Steve Baker, thanks so much for all of the updates. Now get back out of there and get to a red state pretty soon. Stay safe.
We'll do it. Thank you, Jill.